Joining me live in the studio is the Nationals leader in the Senate and also the Shadow Infrastructure Minister, Bridget McKenzie. Thanks for your time. On the likely meeting between Prime Minister Albanese and the Chinese President, do you welcome that apparent rapprochement?
Well, I hope it's likely. You know, obviously continuing dialogue is important, particularly with China. We would welcome that. I know the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, met with the Chinese ambassador last week, and we would need to be focusing, obviously, on those $20 billion worth of trade sanctions. But equally, you know, there's a whole list of 14 grievances, so we need to make sure any meeting with China ensures that we continue to stand up for our Australian values in that relationship.
When you look to one of the areas where they've dropped cooperation entirely is climate. We do have these climate talks ongoing in Egypt. Our government's focus in a big way has been on our backyard, largely what we do vis-a-vis the Pacific. Is that the right focus in your view?
Oh, well, obviously the Labor Party's headed off to COP27 in Egypt. One of our greatest concerns is the signing up to the methane pledge. We know that's going to have a significant impact over time on agriculture. You just need to look across the ditch to New Zealand, where estimates are they're going to reduce farming by 20%, so that's sheep and dairy production. But equally important, I think, for us in the midst of an energy crisis is what a methane pledge would do to the exploration and development of new coal and gas projects. So that's, I think, where we need to be focused rather than thinking it's all about agriculture.
So you think it's almost like a Trojan horse in a way?
Yeah,
absolutely. For those other projects?
Yeah, I think that's where we're going to see a significant impact of signing up to this methane pledge by the Labor government at the very point we need to be increasing supply domestically, particularly of gas, going forward, to actually have a pledge that will restrict the ongoing development of those projects, I think is very much a concern. It's not just my side of politics. The AWU is similarly concerned about the lack of exploration and development of gas projects for our manufacturing sector.
Fiona Simpson at the Farmers Federation, she said signing the pledge signals Australia's voluntary commitment to participate in global action on methane emissions. She says for ag, it will reinforce our commitment to sustainability and ongoing access to key markets. Well, what do you say to her?
Well,
she backs it.
The meat industry a few years ago made it very clear they wanted to be net zero by 2030, our red meat sector, and they're making inroads into making that happen as an industry. To have government pledges, government legislation, I think, increases risk, and we've seen with the legislation of our climate target that there is significant risk to infrastructure projects, etc., as a result of that commitment. And I found it telling in the budget just handed down that while simultaneously increasing our ambition as a country, the Labor government removed specific measures in the budget to the tune of billions and billions of dollars to really assist those communities and industries that are going to feel the impact of that increased ambition to seize the challenges and overcome to seize the opportunities, and to overcome the challenges that a move to net zero will bring. On
industrial relations, it's a big area for you as Shadow Infrastructure Minister. The government wants to get this bill through the Senate by Christmas. What's your read on the numbers right now? Do you think David Pocock will relent in the next sitting?
Well, if David Pocock supports small businesses in this country, then he won't relent. And it's really a question for Senator Pocock. We will be opposing the bill in its entirety. This is a radical change to our industrial relations law, the most extreme we've seen in decades. And in my own area of infrastructure, the civil contractors have come out on Friday and said, you know, they invest that private investment into half of our $84 billion civil contracting industry will be at risk because small to medium enterprises that build our roads and bridges, etc., are not carved out of that construction exemption. It's a very ill thought out bill.
The building construction is civil construction.
Yeah, so they're two different commercial.
Would you like to see a carve out at the very least for for that part of the sector?
Well, I think we're going to see small to medium enterprises in the civil construction sector go broke as a result of targeted attacks by the AWU and the CFMEU if this bill gets up. I mean, this is so ill thought out. The government itself has put up 150 amendments to its own legislation. It's a broken election promise. Chalmers himself said they were not going to, this wasn't part of their policy going forward, and yet here we are. So I think for small to medium enterprises in the infrastructure community, this is a very, very difficult piece of legislation, and that's why we won't be supporting it.
Now, on to another issue that's been, I guess, an annoyance to you for some time now, and that is the legacy of the sports grants program. The Gaetjens report has been made public. Do you accept the findings in that report in its entirety as we've seen it?
Yeah, well, Kieran, accountability and transparency is incredibly important in democracies such as ours. Now, when I was briefed on the Gaetjens report a couple of years ago now, you know, Mr Gaetjens made clear that there was a perceived breach of ministerial standards with respect to a gifted membership that wasn't declared in a timely manner. I would say it played no role in my decision-making, but in the interests of my own personal integrity, when you are faced with a question about whether you, as a minister, have breached ministerial standards, the only appropriate action then is to resign, which I did.
So when he says it's like a breach of trust as well with the electorate, do you accept that?
Well, he also said that I acted within my remit as a minister, within the guidelines, etc., of the policy portfolio. So
you
I
feel
remain
you're
proud of that project.
You're hard done by with this?
I took the appropriate action in resigning. In our system of government, you need to ensure that your integrity is maintained, and the only appropriate response in a breach of ministerial standards should be for the minister to resign, which I did.
And so as we sort of sit here this morning, how do you look back at that episode? What would you have done differently?
Well, it'd be nice for ministerial standard breaches to be dealt with consistently, I think, going forward. I have absolutely no regrets about my decisions at the time. I acted within my remit as minister. With respect to ANAO recommendations, whether it is Liberal, National or Labor ministers, ANA programs are regularly reviewed, and the right of response for the better administration of public funds is to accept those recommendations to better administer, which I did.
So for you, it fundamentally just comes down to that membership of the shooting club. You should have declared that, then it would have been sweet.
Well, that's my understanding of the Gaetjens report. There was a perceived conflict of interest, which I maintained didn't affect my decision-making, but nevertheless, there was a perceived conflict of interest and I took the appropriate action.
A Labor senator last week referred to you as a quote, a naughty little girl during an exchange. Would have been a while since you've been referred to in those terms. What was your reaction to that, and have you accepted Senator Glenn Sterle's apology?
Oh, look, as a senior member of the opposition, it's hardly the first such incident. It is definitely not the worst, and unfortunately won't be the last such sexist comments to be made in this place. I'm glad we called it out, and that under the standing orders, obviously, Mr Sterle apologised and withdrew the comment.
Does it reflect a sort of old guard, an approach by throwing that sort of remark around? Because you talk to some of the younger people around this building when they heard that and they were shocked by it.
Oh, absolutely, and the commentary I've received outside of this place sort of has reflected that position, of course. I think if the Prime Minister is wanting a kinder, gentler Parliament, you know, we need to be making sure those sort of comments aren't part of it.
Senator McKenzie, thanks as always. Appreciate it.